Hello 2360 students. I hope everyone has had a great couple of weeks. So I just wanted to just do a check-in with you, see where we were and how we're doing in the class, and just check on how you are doing. I know over in our area we had some aftermath from the hurricane, so there's been a lot of this is a difficult and challenging time. So I was just wanting to check on you, make sure you guys are safe, and just make sure that you're doing okay. Please reach out if this has affected you as far as internet and anything that you may need, so we can kind of discuss that, and I will be sure to work with you. So we finished module 3, so we're going to begin a new module, but one thing I wanted to kind of caution you about is that because we are doing each module and on a 2-week schedule, it's important for you ever so often to kind of look at the calendar so you'll know where we are. So we are starting module 4, which is all about how do you actually plan to have an inclusive classroom? What do those plans look like? We're specifically going to be looking at another part of our case study project, which is going to be the case study assignment called Transition Plan. Whenever a student who has exceptional needs is coming from another center or a daycare or mom and stay out program or church program, whatever it is, and they're coming into your classroom, there is what we call a transition period. And you, as the receiving teacher, has to work with the school that they're coming from, or the center or daycare or wherever it is, to try to make sure that that plan is in place to make that transition seamless to support that child. So we're really going to be concentrating on that. You will also have to be completing a discussion assignment that goes with module 4. So I just wanted to kind of let you see where we are in the semester. It is September 30th, so you have 2 weeks. Both the transition plan for your case study assignment and then the quiz as well as the discussion will be due on October 13th. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that and kind of where we are. We are getting close to being halfway because you'll see here we only have 7 modules, so we're close to halfway right now. I think next week or the week after will be our halfway point. But just make sure you always look at that schedule. You can find it underneath the Getting Started module. All right, so as I mentioned, we're doing module 4, and really it looks at collaboration. And this is a big part of this module because when we're talking about transitioning, we're looking at the role of the family and maybe some challenges and difficulties that might arise. So this is a really difficult time for families, and it's important for you to have a strong partnership with them. So you're really going to be collaborating throughout this process, not only with the family, but also, as I mentioned, the sending team. We call the sending team the school or center or daycare, church program, wherever that child's coming from into our classroom, that's the sending team. And that partnership is important because we need to meet the needs of that child and support them. We also have to know if we need to refer the child for an IFSP or an IEP. So there's a difference between the two, which are illustrated in the actual module itself. When we're looking at IFSP, we're looking at the support of the whole family, right? Whereas an IEP, it's more individualized toward that student. So those two things are going to be taken into consideration, as well as how do you collaborate with the other sending team and the parents to make this transition process very successful, right? And that's where our focus is going to be on our case study assignment. Now remember, when we're preparing the environment for the student, we're going to support them. We have to look at, again, the universal design for learning and how important that is, because we want to incorporate and integrate both UDL, Universal Design for Learning, as well as what are those recommended practice from DEC, right, for these types of environments. So you also are going to see the UDL, Universal Design for Learning, inside your Inclusive Practices fieldwork. There is a section that talks about this. So as you're working through that module of the inclusive practices, which I hope you continue to work on that because this is a semester-long project, you will see the UDL and how it's mentioned and how that plays a role in an inclusive classroom. So you do have some assigned textbook chapters. You will continue to work on your fieldwork assignment. That's why that's there. You also need to make sure that you are looking at any kind of extra support as far as learning resources. I'm giving you video links. These things make sure that you have a more detailed connection to the content, right, instead of a broader aspect. So for your activities, you will of course post on your discussion board activity as well as submitting a part of your case study project, which is called the case study transition plan, which we'll go over. And you do have your module for a quiz. Now remember, you do have 2 weeks to complete this. You will have 2 lessons that you'll go through that will help support your assignment work. So please make sure that you allow plenty of time so you have those 2 weeks to work with your activities and the lessons. So when we're talking about our objectives, I always tell you it's important for us to not only look at those objectives, the course objectives, but what are our module objectives and how they're connected. And then also looking at some guiding questions that I gave you for each lesson. These questions really help focus in on what's the most important thing I want you to be concentrating on. So I provided questions for 4.1 and 4.2. So within this module, really looking at what does an inclusive classroom look like? What are those recommended practices and elements that you should need? And that's of course going to be including those UDLs. What kind of diagnostic instruments or screening do we need to use with young children who have developmental disabilities? And then also looking at what is a multidisciplinary team, right? How do you work with them effectively so you can coordinate a program, right? And when we mean program, we're talking about setting up your classroom. What's that transition plan? How you integrate the parents? What are some school and community resources that we can offer that family? So that's what we're talking about when we're saying coordinate an appropriate program for that child. Here are the chapters you're going to read that go along. Pay close attention. Chapter 9 is really important on that collaboration piece when we're talking about partnerships of family. And then we're actually going into assessing a child to see if they qualify for IFSP or an IEP. What does that actual process look like and how are you involved? Once we figure that out, then we can start planning transition to support inclusion if that's necessary. And then lastly, looking at UDL, the learning environment and how you can set that up for success for that student and that family. Okay, the vocabulary that you're going to be seeing, a lot of this vocabulary is going to be found within your textbook chapters, but it's also going to be found in the module lessons itself, through the web-based resources, and then the course content that I give you is really going to help you be able to define these terms, but also apply them as well. Okay, so lesson 4.1 is really looking specifically at what are some recommended practices for families and maybe the challenges they might face, as well as, okay, now we need to start taking those steps toward assessment to see if an IFSP or IEP is warranted. How do we identify a refer students who we feel like maybe have an exceptionality, right? Or maybe need some extra support or maybe accommodations. So we're looking specifically at those components. Lesson 4.2 gets specifically into what does a program transition look like, right? So how is it going from the sending team to you, the receiving team? How are you supporting that transition process? So what is your role in the transition process, and then what's the role of the family, as well as what's the role of the sending team? Again, how do we connect those development appropriate practices? What are the DEC recommended practices inside your classroom environment, right? Then we're gonna pull in the principles of UDL, right, and how that plays a role in your classroom. And we give you some examples of universal design and how that plays a role in you supporting the student. And then how does UDL really work in education? So looking at the education component, where are those supports at? Okay, so now that you've gone through those lessons, you're going to work on your 2 activities as well as your quiz. So you'll see here they're all due October 13th. First, I want to go over the discussion activity. So for the discussion activity, what you're going to have to do is you are going to first download this form here. I have a link. And what you're going to do is you are going to be listening to some audios, right, of family partnership. We call it the Connect module. And what these audios are is they're clips from parent interviews or from practitioners who work with students who have special needs. So they're really looking at the topic of how do we have professional family partnerships that are successful. And after you listen through those clips, you're going to be going through this form and completing it. So I suggest having this form downloaded and open as you're listening to the audios to help you. After you complete the form, you're going to do a reflection, and you're going to be answering these questions here. These questions can be copied and pasted at the very bottom of the form, which would make it easier. And what you're going to do is I want you to support your answers in the form through your reflection with these guiding questions I give you. And then you're just going to put your whole form as an attachment inside of the discussion board. So let me show you the actual form. So this form here is really asking you to listen to those audio clip interviews. And you're going to have to fill out 2 suggestions that you could actually incorporate. So when you're listening to the audio clips, you have several audio clips here you'll see, and in each box I want you to think about the suggestions they gave you on how to build family professional partnerships that were successful, things that you would actually want to incorporate into your own classroom for these practices. And you're going to put at least 2 for each audio clip. At the bottom, you'll see here on the second page, that's where your reflection is going to go. That's where you're going to paste in the answers to these questions. It might be easier for you just to copy and paste them in here and then just write your answer as well. And then you will save this, and then that's what you'll put inside of the actual discussion board. There is a link to get to the discussion board where you will put it. Remember, you need to reply to at least 2 classmates. And when you're looking at replying to them, a lot of us might have the same kinds of suggestions that they've taken from each audio clip. If I'm focusing on a reply to my classmate, I'm really going to start looking at the reflection questions, because that's where it's going to open up to a discussion, and we'll be able to add more on that part instead of just focusing on the suggestions. Otherwise, we're just saying the same thing back and forth. Really look at the reflection and responding to that section. So that's what you will do for the discussion activity. The next activity you're going to have is going to be your case study project work. So this one's called Case Study Transition Plan. And I wanted to take a moment to go over what you're going to be doing. So this transition plan, as I mentioned, is where you are looking at the process of this child changing from one program to another. So they're coming from another program to your program. And your role in this assignment is to be on a planning team, right? And you're going to pretend you're on a planning team. And that is going to help you be the receiving program team. And that's going to be your role in this whole process. Now remember, when you picked your case study child, you're going to keep that same child. So whatever you did your disability PowerPoint on, that's what you're going to use that same child for this transition team project. So the first thing you're going to do is there is a planning form. That's the first thing you'll need to do, okay? The planning form is right here. So you will have to click on it, and you're going to download the form, and I'll go over it in just a moment. So that's the first thing you need to do in this project. Now, the planning form is supposed to identify who's going to be on part of the planning team. Okay, so specifically for your case study child. So you're not going to list someone who was at her old program. Okay, the old program is a sending team and you're collaborating, but who's going to be part of the transition planning team? So you're going to be able to talk about that. The other thing you're going to talk about in this form is really how we set goals and identify challenges for that specific case study child you have, right? So you're going to have 3 broad goals that are provided to you. And your job is to identify what are some possible challenges that might arise, right? Specifically for the child and the family and for you at the program that you're planning for. So problems can arise, different ones depending on the child and their background. So it could be stuff like location, transportation. Is this an increased class size? They're used to a smaller class and now they're coming to a larger one. Maybe they only went for a couple hours a day and now they have to stay all day. These are just some examples of challenges that they might face. Also, you have to think about how many staff members you have that's trained to work with children who have disabilities. So these broad goals that's given to you really are going to help you be achievable in this transition period. Now, we say the transition period lasts about 3 months, right, before the change. So 3 months prior to the child moving, all the way up to a few weeks after that change. That's how long that transition period is. So you will be writing activities, right, to achieve these goals. So once we have our goal set, we have our challenges listed, then we're going to think about how do we support these goals? What are some activities? Now, when we talk about activities, we break it down into 2 parts. You have activities that you're going to do that's going to be done with the child before they come to you, and then you're going to have activities that's going to be done for the child after the child starts the program. Okay, so this is important, and we're going to go over this on the sheet, and I'll let you see what I'm talking about. But remember, you have to have 2 sets of activities. If we're saying the transition time period is 3 months, at least 3 months before that child comes to you, and then a few weeks after that child comes to you, then that means we've got to have activities to support both, right, to make the seamless transition. So remember, whenever you're thinking about activities, they have to support those goals that we have for that child, right? So they need to be connected to those goals. And remember, these goals and these activities support the child, the family, the program, and the staff, and the classroom design. It supports all of that. Now, with any plan you have, we have to know, did it work, right? We're evaluating that plan. We're evaluating the procedures. That's the last step. We have to do follow-ups. We've got to monitor their progress so we can be able to communicate if this transition was successful or not, right? Remember, this is not a plan for academic IEP process. This is specifically the success of the transition from one center or area or school or class to another class, right? Where we have supportive relationships, collaboration, we have a plan in place for that student. Okay, now, there is a rubric here to show you how I'm going to be grading you. It is worth 25 points. The form I told you to download was the first thing you're going to do. We're going to go over it. And also, I created another link here for you that I feel like is beneficial, right? This connects to your 2 lessons you did. And it's going to be an explanation of what we call transition terms. And that just means so you'll be better equipped to know what we're talking about when we start using these terms. So let's go to your transition plan, right? Because this is what you're going to be turning in, and let's walk through these steps. So the child is going to be your case study child, okay? The description of the transition is what is occurring. Where are they coming from? All this information of where they're coming from is the school that they're at and where they're going to, and we're going to look at that in just a moment, right? You're going to put that part down. That's just demographics, right? That's background. Now we start the work of the transition planning process. The first one is you're going to identify the planning team, right? That's the one most crucial components. Who is on the team? Now, when we're talking about members of the transition team, those are people on your team. Who's going to be on this team and what role do they play, right? So what do they bring to the team? Obviously, you're going to be on there. What role do you have? If you have any support staff, what do they do? Obviously, you have parents. So who's going to be on this team? And remember, a lot of stuff is in our modules, in our module, in our lessons, where we talk about who's on the planning team, transition planning team and their roles. So who might be on there? So you're going to be looking at that when it's helping you answer this first section of the form. The second one is where we get into our goals, right? So there's always 3 broad goals we look at for any transition process. We look at effective communication, we look at positive relationships, and we look at supportive environment. Now, when you were looking at your case study, child, we had lots of information on that child, your child specifically. What are some possible challenges you see with communication with your child, right? You're going to look in their case study profile. What about positive relationships? When we're talking about interaction between peer-to-peer or peer-to-teacher, do you see some possible challenge for that child? What are they? And then we're looking at specifically the environment, how we support that child in the environment. So what could be some possible challenges you see there, right? And you're going to list those. And remember, you list 1 challenge for each effective goal. Now, the next section we're looking at is you are going to answer these questions. And these questions in this section are really looking at the family and the child, right? So what role does the sending program have in this transition? And when you answer this, I want you to think about you and your role and how you support that child. Think about what role the family plays. And then think about the receiving program, the program who's sending this child to you. What role do they have? Now we start to plan, right? So we're going to use this table to help us plan. We are going to have to create some activities, meaningful activities that are related to our goal here, right? Effective communication, how do we support positive relationships, and how do we have supportive environments? Now, here's the thing. You got to have at least 4. Okay, I know we have 3 goals here, but you need to have at least 4 activities that's going to support these goals. So whenever you're trying to create goals, I first want you to look at what goals are we setting. This first section is for before. What are you going to have that school that the child's at right now before they come to you? What are some activities you can set up that's going to help this transition be more seamless, right? So what could that school do for helping us with communication, with building positive relationships and supportive environments? So what needs to happen before the child comes to you, right? And right here, that's where you're going to list those 4 activities. Now, when we say number of goal supports, is it going to be number 1, effective communication? Does it support number 2, positive relationships? Or does it support number 3, supportive environment? And then I want you to just describe the activity, right? If anyone were to come along and like this transition plan, you would need to describe it to where it would make sense to them, right? Even if they weren't completely aware of everything that was going on. So it needs to be simple enough where anyone can understand it. And then person responsible is who's going to help carry out this goal. Is it you? Is it the parents? Is it the sending team? Who in the sending team is going to be doing that? And these are the things to look at. But make sure they're meaningful and they have to be connected to our goal when you're creating them. The second one of activities that you're going to do is after they get to you. So this is meaning that they're already in your class, right? So what are some activities you can do to help this process be more smooth and seamless? So what are some things you can do with that child? What goals do they support? And explain that activity. And who is responsible in your school program for this? Now the last part is important. This is where we're going to evaluate how did this work. Now, whenever we're talking about evaluating something, we ask ourselves questions, and in order to evaluate, you have to be monitoring the entire time, right? So you have to be looking. This means you could be taking anecdotal notes. You could have a checklist ready. how are you going to actually determine that these goals and activities right here, right, these activities and goals have been met, that the transition process was successful, right, using these activities up here? How are you going to evaluate that? And any adjustments that might need to be made. Okay, so that's pretty much going to be your assignments. Don't forget that you also have to do the Module 4 quiz. All right, guys, one more thing before I jump off here is I wanted to remind you that you still need to be working on your inclusive practices fieldwork. Do not forget that, because this is a semester-long project. It is worth a big chunk of your grade. Since you are not going out into the schools and in a school setting, this is important for you to complete this. We've already discussed this. I do have a video on the course homepage that walks you through this video. Walks you through this process in the video, so please make sure you watch it. There's two sections underneath Getting Started module that talks about, the first one is the assignment itself, and the second one is your choice of personas, which is a child that you choose to work with for your actual project. There is research involved as well. So please make sure, there are several parts that go along with this. So please make sure you watch that video and reach out if you have any questions. Now, also to remind you, you will have to go back and look at your case study child when you're completing work for Module 4, right? Because you need to pull up that profile to help you with making your goals, seeing possible challenges, and planning activities. So just make sure you have that pulled up when you're looking at it, okay? All right, guys, that's all for now. Please reach out if you have any questions, and until next time, take care. Be safe.